Hello, the participant of Summer Camp 2022. Today I would like to present about visual ethnography as a theme of this summer school. My name is Muhammad Zamzam Pauzanafi. I am a lecturer in the Department of Anthropology, University of Gadjah Mada, and in the specialty of visual ethnography, digital ethnography, and also political anthropology. So for today, I will present an introduction to visual ethnography. We will start it with the definition. What is actually ethnography? Ethnography is a process of creating and representing knowledge about society, culture, and individuals that is based on ethnographers' own experiences. It does not claim to produce an objective account of reality, but should aim to offer versions of ethnographers' experiences of reality that are as loyal as possible to the context, negotiations, and intersubjectivities through which the knowledge was produced. So what is visual ethnography? Visual ethnography is the use of visual approaches, media, such as photography, film or video, drawing, etc., to learning and knowing about and in the world and communicating this to others. At least there is two general methods or approaches in visual ethnography. First one is unmediated realist frame, based on observational approaches, mostly related to the sociological inquiry, tended to propose prescriptive frameworks that aim to distance, objectify, and generalize, and thereof detract from the very qualities and potentials that the ambiguity and expressivity of visual images offer ethnography. The second one is phenomenological and sensory approaches. It means that visual ethnography concerns with the production of knowledge and ways of knowing rather than with the collection of data. Thus, visual ethnography as a reflexive, situated, and collaborative practice necessitates critical and multisensory approaches. There are two techniques that I want to present today. The first one is ethnophotography, or combination between ethnography and photography, or the using phenomenological and sensory approaches as methods. And the second one is ethnographic film or video. It means that using film or video for ethnographic research. We will start with the first one, ethnophotography. Ethnophotography, as a visual sensory phenomenological method, is not just looking at and gathering data, but more being in and engaging in ways of knowing about the words and actions of other people. It is including being with the informants by walking, working, eating, eliciting, or discussing image that we call as photo elicitation, and talking with them. It is also mean that it is not just method for collection data to be analyzed later, but more involves the production of meaning in participation with them through a shared activity in a shared place. There are some theories that can build up through these approaches. The first one is theory called optical unconscious. Optical unconscious means photography captures everyday objects of ordinary experience which are revealed as strange and unsettling, a different nature presenting itself to the camera than to the naked eye. Photography helps discover hitherto unknown, unknowledge, and analyzed by perception, and therefore restricted to the space of an unconscious, or as Walter Benjamin called, as an optical unconscious. movement and dimension of reality. In other words, these new technical images may include information that was not retained, processed, or even intended by the operator, hence the hope for serendipity of the images. To put it simple, a photograph or camera can reveal something that not intended to be revealed by the photographs. Because our eyes is picking, our eyes is only see what we want to see. But photograph can capture all the things that are in front of the camera alongside the frame. So everything that appears in the frame, that will appears to our consciousness. It differs with our naked eyes. Our naked eyes, when we see something, we only see that we want to see. And something that in front of our eyes, sometimes it slips to our unconscious. When we use photograph, the photograph will reveal or will re-emerge that something that we don't want to see, that reveal in front of the camera and then represented in the frame. For example, this is the photograph from the very popular photograph from France, Eugene Edget. And Walter Benjamin said this photo can reveal something that we usually don't see in our everyday life, which is the image of the city with nobody in it. This is another example of how optical unconscious working in our photograph. This picture is taken by a participant of ethnophotography workshops a long time ago that I conduct. The photographers want to capture daily activity of women when they doing their everyday activities. As we can see here, there is a pictures of woman named Butati, and the photographer said, and put it in the text, it written, when Butati cooks, she never add artificial flavoring to her cooking. She prefer to use natural and traditional ingredients. That's what the photographer want to reveal, or the intention of the photographer is want to portray what Butati cooks, and he want to emphasize on the using of the natural ingredients. But if we really see the photograph back there in the wall, it reveals back there in the wall there is something hanging. And in Indonesian context, if somebody who from Indonesia will recognize what this is, it is artificial flavoring, or sometimes we call it MSG. So the pictures tells something different from the intention of the photographs. The photographs, his eyes don't want to see the artificial flavoring hanging in the wall, but the pictures re-emerge that pictures, that artificial flavoring. So something that optically unconscious from the eyes of the photographer can be emerged using the photograph that he took. So this is something the photograph can be used as a tool for research. Photograph can reveal something that hidden, something that we don't see. Another theory, or the second theory, is theory from Roland Barthes from intellectual from France, and also you'll see also another theory came from Elizabeth Edward, anthropologist from United States. The theory is called studium and punctum, or evidence and affect. Every photograph has these two qualities. One is studium or evidence. Another one is punctums or affect. In studium aspect or in evidence aspect, photograph actually show what photographers trying to show. But in punctum or in affect side, the photograph can reveal what photographers do to allow or make spectators to see. And then in the studium part of photography, photographs can reveal general message, what are generally acknowledged by people. And in the punctum side, what it reveals, it details that pricks or wound, or the rare detail that attracts you to an image. And in the studium side of the photograph, what portrayed is the obvious meaning, or in linguistic term, we call it denotative meanings. And in the punctum or in the affect side, what is revealed is obtuse meaning, or some meaning that not really clear, but it has connotative or metaphoric sense of it. Another aspect of studiums, the photograph, it appears as an information to our cognitive or to our brain. And in the side of punctums, photograph can give us a memory of sense and experience. And in the studium side of photograph is related to the notions of good and or bad photograph. Is related to how photograph can be composed, or the angle and everything related to the technical of photography. But in punctum side, it's not really related to the notion of good or bad photograph, but it's more related to how that photograph can reveal our emotions or affective side of our cultures. And in the studium side, photos can reveal ethnographic evidence of how people wearing their clothes every day, for example, and how people build their house, or how people speak, and how people act in their everyday life. It's more like ethnographic data, and in the punctum side, it's more like the feeling or the emotions of how culture being experienced by people. This is some example of what is punctum and what is studiums in the photograph from Cartes. This photo is analyzed by Roland Barthes in his book. For example, in this photo, we can see that there is a general general information or a studium. For example, the way people in the photograph wearing their dress, the way people walking, and also, for example, the house behind the people and the road that they are stepping into. And that all is a studium information or studium part of the photograph. But for the spectators, in this case is Roland Barthes, for him, there is a one tiny detail that freaked him, that interested to him. That is the road. Roland Barthes give more attention to the road because the road is give him a feeling of some things that important is related to the textures of the road and the condition of the road in Romania at that time. The second one, this is example from the very popular photograph from New York, William Klein. And for most of the people, maybe they will attracted to the gun in the hand of this man that pointed to the head of these children. And also people will see also the way people wearing a dress, and also maybe the smile of the boy, and everything that obviously we can see it from this photo. But for Roland Barthes as a spectator or as somebody who analyzed this photo, he interested to the condition, or the condition of this the teeth of this boy, or the bad teeth of this boy. So something very simple, or something it's like tiny detail that some people want to explore more. It is called punctum. And other information that become the background of this little detail is that we call studium. We will continue with the more practice things related to how to use photography as a method of visual ethnography, or we call it as ethnophotography. And this part is more like skills or more practice things that we can use when we make a photo during our research. I use my own ethnophotography research as an example to explain the technique that I use. The research itself is about privatization of the sense of comfort, or this is related to vision consumption and sensory transformation in the small city called Tasikmalaya in West Java. The first technique that I want to emphasize here is, if we want to make a research using photography, our visual ethnography research using photography, the first step that you need to do is make a mix of wide, medium, and detailed photographs of the subjects. Wide-angle photographs record more of the context and the interrelationship of the situation. The wider the view, generally the greater volume of potential information within it, and the more likely we are to later discover aspects we had previously missed. Conversely, narrower, more selective photographs provide more detail and are important in working through an understanding of specific, as in the steps of an artistic or technical processes. But their value is limited without a wider context in which to place them. This is the example of my own work. I took these two photographs. One is more wide, with using more wide aspect, and then another one is more detailed. One photograph shows one of the clothes shops on Hajat Street in Tasikmalaya, which still maintains the old style display. Only a few examples of clothes on display can be seen as well as touched. Most of the clothes are stored behind the glass cabinets or behind the sale counter. And the second photo is a more narrower photo that we can see the detail. We can see that the store with an old style display, several mannequins began to put on the display. We take advantage of limited space. From these two photos, I draw a kind of conclusion that to buy clothes are to make verbal contact and negotiation with the seller to measure consumer bodies that fit for the clothes. The second technique is, if we want to make a photograph for our ethnophotography research, we need to make photographs from a variety of angles and distances. This is an extension of same principle. Just as a mix of wide and more detailed image enhance the range of potential information, so too does a mix of angles of view. Make photographs from a variety of height not just eye level, a variety of distance, not simple at the same distance each time, and a variety of angles to capture different views, not simple from in front. Realistically, not all situations permit the photograph to obtain a mix of angles, but they should be obtained if at all possible. This is the example from my work. I took a different angles and from this shopping center called Asia Plaza, and from that all pictures we can grab or we can get the information about what is called to be a comfortable in this shopping center. Comfortable or nyaman in Indonesian is become the basic setup for this shopping center. Asia Plaza, a comfortable or nyaman shopping mall, the largest mall in Tasikmalaya, when another toko or store, Toko Asia and Asia department store are no longer sufficient for the shopping desires of Tasikmalaya dissidents. So before this shopping center is built, there is another store that not really comfortable, but they starting to change it and to become more huge and then with a lot of modern facilities. The third practice that we need to do when we make a photograph is we need to compose photos in terms of the age of the frame so as to maximize the informational content. Do not automatically place the main subject in the center, but rather compose the photograph to maximize the use of the whole frame. This means thinking about where the age falls rather than about what is in the center. We want to use the camera to extend our visions, not merely to reaffirm it. By composing from the edge, we start to break away from a subject-oriented view to one of discovery, using the image as a net within which to obtain more of the elusive and simmering catch of the information and insight. This is the example of a photo that I took. This photo is about this children's model. So after winning the children's model competition, this little model looks tired. Standing by the trophy, he holds a certificate of appreciation bearing the logo of the political party down there in the certificate. Through this photo, I get insight about the possibility of exploitation of children in the world of fashion or modeling, and led me to the discovery about the connection between the world of fashion and politics. In this photo, as we can see, in the beginning, I try to put the face of the children as a center, but then I also want to reveal what is the context of this tired or the expression of these children, and I decide to put all another information in the edge of the photos, which is the trophy itself, and then also the certificates, and most important thing is the logo of the political party down there in the certificate. Another step that we need to make when we make a photograph or ethnographic research, we need to make a photograph in a set and sequence, not simply a single shot. This means tracking actions, people, processes, and places through time and space. Only in this manner can we begin to discover and appreciate how social process occurs or how material elements relate. Single photographs are prosthetic to work with because by themselves they usually leave us with more questions than answer, lacking both spatial and temporal context within which to make them comprehensible. This is an example from my own work. I took several photographs in sequence, in process, not only one photograph. This one is photographs of process of fashion show in the mall in shopping mall in Tasikmalaya. As you can see, there is a lot of pictures that I took. This kind of sequences when the models on the stage and present their dress and their outfits, and then also how the audience try to see it and to enjoy this fashion show. And by making these multiple photographs and also in sequences in process, I can gather information about how shopping mall as a multisensory event and experiences. Consumers see fashion show where clothes with certain brands are worn by ideal bodies. At the same time, they also display their fashion style for others to see. That's my finding when I took a lot of photographs, not only one photographs in this fashion show event. Another step is be sure to photograph what comes before or after focal activity as well as moments of transition. We want to know how things came to be and what their aftermath may be, capturing the chains of action and consequences that make up both the mundane and the spectacular. Transitions are often crucial for understanding both social and technical processes as they define new beginnings and endings, shaping what follows while signaling the end of what came before. I took this photograph also during this fashion show, and this photo is happening. It happened in sequence. In the left, we can see the models, the male models, on the stage, and on the right is the transition between this action to another action, which is the response from the audiences. And as we can see, the response of audiences is there is two ladies laughing at the models, the male models, and also there is a more mature lady who feel unsatisfied with the situation. And these two photos were taken sequentially when a male model who appears in the fashion show is considered not to display an ideal body, such as handsome, tall, or sexy. Young women, the audience, laugh at him, and woman looks disappointed. So by giving attention more to the sequences, we can see that one process lead to another process. One event lead to another event, and when we're putting together, we will reveal a lot of information and a lot of meaning of that event. The next techniques is when we make photographs, we need to make photographs at regular intervals, even when nothing seems to be happening. We cannot assume that we know when something significant is present, and should make visual notes consistently through time and space, within which we may discover previously unappreciated phenomena. Just because we don't see anything happening or anything important does not mean that it's not there to be discovered later in the photographs, either by ourselves or by others more knowledgeable. For example, these two photos I took when I feel that there is nothing happen during my fieldwork, but I try to to discipline myself to make a sequence of photograph that I took every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes that was happening in front of me. And these two photographs, then when we have a discussion with the subjects in the photograph, can reveal a very important finding. When I feel nothing seems to be happening, or I have no idea what to be shoot next, I took several random photos regularly. These are some results from the process. These 2 photos later on, through photo elicitation method, able to elicit important knowledge and sensory experience of, they call it lustful gaze or tatapan nafsu. Lustful gaze create a sense of uncomfortable to my informants. They will feel comfortable or nyaman when they are wear branded, beautiful, and sexy dress, and to be looked with the gaze of admiration or tatapan kagaguman. We can see from these 2 pictures there is a 2 males whose gaze or see 2 ladies wearing colorful clothes and headscarf. And from that gaze, the informant can understand and reveal some findings that are very important in my research, which is the type of gaze from a male to woman. And another technique that we will use when we make photographs for ethnophotography research is we need to make photographs of the mundane or everyday things as well as the dramatics. We are habituated to recording perceived peaks of cultural process, forgetting that life is often not dramatic, that people do not live only at the peaks. It is often the mundane, undramatic steps along the way that are most essential to cultural process. And it is in everyday events that the foundation of our lives are truly found. This 2 photo shows everyday mundane shopping activities and dramatic unusual situation when the shopping mall employee feels asleep on the top of a pile of clothes he was selling. So our culture or our everyday life is based on these mundane activities, not in the dramatic action of our everyday life. In the journalistic practices, the photographer tend to try to capture more dramatic actions because it's related to news. When it becomes dramatic or sensational, people will see the pictures. But in the ethnophotographic research, we need not only to focus on this dramatic situation. We need to more focus on the mundane or everyday life because our culture is formed or based on this everyday life that is not dramatic. The next step is we need to keep good notes or annotation that can provide background and identification for your photographs. Do not depend on memory. Photographs beyond a certain point do not speak for themselves, and their meaning and significance are defined by context. Anything that extends the contextual information associated with an image extends its value. Digital camera can be set to record basic temporal information automatically. And with computers, image, and associated annotation, they may be combined into visual databases, easily organized and searched, providing the basic annotation was made to begin with. So, to make it simple, that if we do a photography or ethnophotography research, we will take a lot of pictures, hundreds or maybe 1,000 pictures. And we need to make a very good annotation within this huge file of photographs, so we can easily find it or easily coding it to some our when we're doing interpretation. We need to find which photograph that we will use and which photograph we will interpret and then to become our data. And to be able to do that, you need to keep good notes or annotation. And Another thing that we can do when we're doing ethnophotographic research, we can do what we call as a photo elicitation. Photo elicitation is the process when the selected photos were then shown to the subject or informants related to what was revealed through photo, either as a subject that is captured by the camera or a subject that has relationship or experience with the what is captured by the camera. By showing the photos to the certain subjects or informants, it will provoke and reveal certain memories, sensory experience, and feelings related to consumption process and practices that are facilitated by the images in the photo. This process, which is called photo elicitation as multisensory event, is expected to reveal how the subject or informant perceive or sensing their material and social world through the practices of clothing and fashion consumption in my case. This photo that I use for photo elicitation. So I bring all these photos to the subjects in the photo or the informant who are captured in the pictures. And they starting to see it, and then they're starting to reveal their memory about this photo. And they will give a lot of information adding to these photos. These are some photos used in the photo elicitation process. These photos reveal memory, sensory experience, and feeling of comfortable and uncomfortable. Or in Indonesian, we call it nyaman dan tidak nyaman. When my informants wearing their favorite clothes, and the feeling when they are looked at with lustful gaze or admiring gazes. This all the technique that I use to make ethnophotographic research. And we will continue to the next approaches or methods in visual ethnography. It is ethnographic film or video, or the use of film or video as ethnographic research tools. And there is several methods or approaches that usually apply to this process of making film using ethnographic approaches. The first one is ethnographic film as a record. It defines the primary purposes of ethnographic film as being to preserve in the mind of the viewer the structure of the events it is recording as interpreted by the participants. This method has a focus on how picture can capture whole bodies, whole people, whole interaction, and whole acts. And by make a record of the whole bodies of the informants on whole peoples and whole interaction and whole acts that conducted by our informant, it can be explained by the desire to create record that might be of service to the wider scientific community. This frame or ethnographic film as a record use film as a data or evidence. And it's influenced by anthropological argument to be sure, but not as constituting an argument of its own. As such, this approach tends to be emphasize the importance of providing supplementary text. This is the example of how film or video is using this method of film as a record.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
So this film made by anthropologists Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson in Bali this is a kind of very classic ethnographic film at that time. And this film is about trance and dance in Bali. So as we can see from the picture or from the film, there is a text that introduced in the beginning of the film to give a context or like a scientific explanation of what this is about, what is the meaning of the trance and dance in Bali. And then as we go along, we can see how this whole body of the dancer appears in the camera, and there is no cut, for example, on their head or their only hand, but all the pictures try to be stay in this more like wide, even long shot, so we can see all the activities as a whole. Dipercepat.
Her into a supernatural figure. Beside her is her daughter, who has been rejected
And also
by
the
the king of the
ethnographers,
country.
in this case is Margaret
In
Mead,
revenge for the slight
also
to her
put
daughter,
the
she is now
explanation
training her
on this
little
photo,
novices
and the
to spread
explanation
excellence.
is more like a scientific explanation of what we see in the pictures.
They answer
And
her
so this all
on how to
is
spread
tend
the
to become like evidence of what the characters of Balinese can be portrayed by these activities. There is dance and trance in Bali. The next approach in ethnographic film or video is ethnographic film as a text. If in the ethnographic film as a record that I told you
They go
before,
on. And
the
next
frame
video
aims
shows a
its
pregnant
sight
woman
at
among a
something
group of
more
people
kind
who
to
have fled their
illustration. The
plague-stricken
ethnographic
village
film
to
as a
wander the
text,
road.
championed by
This is the first
Ruby,
scene where the
asks
pregnant
us
woman,
to think
played by a
seriously
man,
about how
gives
image
birth to a
might be
child,
able to
while
do
witches lurk
and
about
what
to
text
steal
can
the
do.
newborn child.
An ethnographic film should be subjected to the same or analogously rigorous scientific examination and criticism
Which is stolen by the
as any
witch
other
child,
product
tossed in
of
the air,
anthropology.
killed, and
Yang ini
returned
diulang
dead to
sebentar.
its mourning relatives.
The second
Villagers
approach
mourn for the dead
in
child,
ethnographic
mourn for
film
the theatrical
is ethnographic
display
film
of
as a
grief.
text.
The witches,
If in the
witch child and
first
witch,
approaches
and teased
there
the
is
mortals,
ethnographic
to whom they
film
are
as a
not yet
record,
quite visible.
this second
As they
approach,
become
the
visible,
ethnographic
the
film
mortals
as a
chase
text,
the witches.
is more related to how image might be able to do what text can
The
do.
witch child is caught and
Or
held by the
an
hair.
ethnographic film
the
should be
meaning gesture.
subjected to the same
In just
or
a minute now, you will
analogously
see the witch
rigorous
in her
scientific
supernatural
examination
form
and
at the gate of
criticism
the
as
temple,
any other product of
attacked by the
anthropology.
emissary of the king, who fails to conquer her.
As an example, this is a
She
video or
wears over
film
her face a white
called
cloth,
The Axe
the
Fight
cloth in which a
from
mother
Timothy
carries
As.
her baby.
As we can see in this film tried to capture an event which is the axe fight between people in one clan, in the Yomamamo people, and this film tried to make a very rigorous analytical explanation of how this aspect or the fight between this one clan possible. And to do that, the filmmaker or the anthropologist try to reveal this event by three types of explanation. The first explanation, they put a context of what happened in this event or the axe fight. The first part of this film, we cannot really in the first part of the film, the anthropologist try to show the event without any explanation, so the audience can see it as a mere data without any interpretation. But then in the second part, the anthropologist starting to make interpretation of what is actually happening in front of his camera by making explanation using more verbal explanation. And then in the third part, the anthropologists try to make more deeper analytical anthropological analytics that is use this explanation of the kinship, of the structure of the kinship may contribute to this event, to the axe fight between this clan. And to do that, this anthropologists put some text on it, on the picture. So even they draw something that is related to the kinship structure in this particular tribe. So as we can see, this film is more like similar to text, to ethnographic text. So it tried to provide data and then interpretation, and then more deep analytical explanation using theory. In this end is a kinship theory. That's the second approaches, which is the film as a text. And the third approaches in ethnographic film or video is ethnographic film as a sense impression, where the film as a record frame should to downplay the aesthetic device of cinema to capture whole acts, and the textual frame should to imbue the visual with the qualities found in the written ethnographies. Our third frame, which is ethnographic film as a sense impression, reject the supposed inferiority of image to text. Instead, it emphasized the unique elements already found in the visual communication. As one of the supporters of these approaches, Casting Taylor, anthropologist from Harvard University, argued that film can capture something of the lyricism of lived experience in a way that text cannot. And also another filmmaker and anthropologist from Australia, David McDougall, also insists that image can do things which word cannot. He said that this ability of images allow us to re-enter the corporeal spaces of our own and others' life. The third approach in ethnographic film or video is ethnographic film as a sense impression, where the film as a record frame should to downplay the aesthetic devices of cinema to capture whole acts, and the textual frame sought to be imbue the visual with the qualities found in the written ethnographies. Our third frame or approaches, ethnographic film as a sense impression, reject the supposed inferiority of image to text. Instead, it emphasizes the unique elements already found in the visual communication. Anthropologist and filmmaker from Harvard University, Casting Taylor, argue that film can capture something of lyricism of life experience in a way that the text cannot. And anthropologist David McDougall and also filmmaker said that image can do things which word cannot. He said that this ability of images allow us to re-enter the corporeal spaces of our own and others' life. The manner in which we all, as social creatures, assimilate forms and textures through our senses, learn things before we understand them, share experience with others, and move through the varied social environments that surround us. David McDougall, an anthropologist and also a filmmaker, insists that image can do things which words cannot. He said that this ability of images allow us to re-enter the corporeal spaces of our own and others' life. The manner in which we all, as social creators, assimilate forms and textures through our senses, learning things before we understand them, share experience with others, and move through the varied social environments that surround us. This is an example of this ethnographic film using the approaches film as a sense impression. This film called Into the Hinterland, and it's made by the PhD student from sensory lab in Harvard University. So as you can see in this film, the camera tried to follow and mimic the movement of the some dancers. And by doing that kind of camera movement and approaches, this film want to this film want to take an audience into the experience of being a dancer or in particular environment. In this sense, in this film, the environment is actually the place that this group, the studio of this dancer. We can use these approaches also to different kind of cultural event or process. It's not only related to, for example, like art or dancing, but we can also use these approaches, for example, to understand how people are living in certain environment. For example, to become a fisherman in the boat, or to become a peasant or farmer, experiencing their environment, for example. And by doing these approaches, culture is not only about meaning or about cognitive thinking, but culture is more about how people living in the world, using their sensory, using their senses. And the last approaches in ethnographic film is ethnographic film as a relational practices. Ethnographic film as a relational practices, it means that the ethical and political relationship that ethnographic and other documentary filmmakers co-construct with the subjects whose lives are central to their films. I think of this relational documentary practice as the fundamental act for visual or audio non-fiction media makers who take seriously the accountability that ideally accompanies the privilege of making films about other people's life. In these approaches is including participatory videos. Participatory videos is a film or outputs of film are often created through and or informed by collaborative and participatory process or researching and photographing or make a video recording activities and experiences of various kind. They are often made by the target audience and use the potential of film to facilitate the making of new intercultural understanding, or sometimes we call it too as a cultural brokerage. So to put it simple, participatory video or ethnographic film as a relational practices we try to make a collaboration with the subjects and or informants to make the films. So the film become our film, not only a film of the anthropologists or the filmmakers, but film that also made together with the informants or with the subjects. In some case, even the camera itself was given to the subjects, so they can film their own culture or their own activities. And in some outputs also, they doing their own editing process. So all the process of the film is always involve the subject itself or the informant itself. Yeah. This is an example of how to use these approaches, which is participatory video or ethnographic film as a relational practices. So this film is about young people in Ponorogo try to express their identity through traditional dance, and the dance called Jatilan or Jaranan. And to be able to do this kind of film, we share our knowledge and we share our experience, and sometimes we share also the shot of the film. So sometimes the camera and the film or the footage taken by these young people, by the subject itself. Sometimes I use a cameraman to make pictures of them dancing, for example, or doing another activities. But the most important thing is we collaborate in creating the story. So we are together sitting, have a discussion, what kind of pictures that we want to show, what kind of film that we want to show, what story that we want to show. All these stories based on that discussion. And that's why this film is actually not... Okay, diulang dari yang terakhir aja. And through this kind of process, we will see how people construct their cultures based on their experience and their contact with different people and discussion with a lot of people. This ethnographic film as a relational practices is the last approaches that I present in these lectures of introductory to visual ethnography. And thank you for your attention.